Whispers of Italy, a journey through light and time. It was early May when I left Paris with a small leather suitcase, a camera, and the uneasy thrill that comes before a long-dreamed journey. The spring air had just begun to warm, brushing against the edges of summer, and Italy, my imagined land of golden light and quiet miracles, called to me like a half-remembered song. I told myself I was traveling to see art, to taste wine, to trace history's footsteps. But beneath all those neat reasons was something more elusive. I wanted to feel alive again after years of routine, to lose myself in beauty until I found myself anew. Day 1. Rome, the pulse of the eternal city. The train rolled into Rome just as the sun spilled over the rooftops like honey. From the moment I stepped onto the cobblestones near Termini station, the city felt alive, its heart beating in sync with my own. The air was thick with espresso, exhaust, and centuries of whispered prayers. I wandered toward the Colosseum, the great stone beast crouched beneath the Roman sky. Standing before it, I imagined the roar of the crowds, the clang of swords, the taste of dust in the mouth. Time blurred, ancient and modern Rome overlapped like transparent film. The street musician's violin sang a soft, haunting melody that echoed through the arches. I tossed a coin into his open case, and he smiled as if sharing a secret only the stones could tell. Later, I climbed the Spanish steps, gelato melting faster than I could eat it, and watched lovers, tourists, and locals weave their lives together in the afternoon sun. By nightfall, I sat at a trattoria in Trastevere, where a weathered waiter insisted I try his mother's cacio e pepe. It was simple, just cheese, pepper, and pasta, but the flavor seemed to hold all of Rome's contradictions: chaos and grace, history and hunger, eternity and the fleeting now. Day 2, Florence, where art breathes. The next morning, I took the early train north to Florence, and the city rose before me like a dream of marble and music. The Duomo towered above the red-tiled roofs, its dome catching the sun in copper and rose. The air was scented with bread from nearby bakeries, and the faint metallic tang of the Arno River. Inside the Uffizi Gallery, I lost myself among Botticelli's curves and Caravaggio's shadows. Standing before the birth of Venus, I thought of how fragile beauty is, and how fiercely it endures. An elderly guide with silver hair noticed my wonder and told me, "L'arte è come il tempo, non muore, cambia forma." Art is like time. It doesn't die, it changes shape. That night in a tiny wine bar tucked behind Piazza della Signoria, I met a local painter named Sofia. She showed me her ink-stained hands and laughed when I told her I couldn't draw a straight line. "In Italy," she said, "we don't draw lines, we draw feelings." We drank Chianti until the lights blurred, and I left with the taste of grapes and possibility lingering on my lips. Day 3. Tuscany. The quiet of the vines. Morning brought me to the rolling hills of Tuscany, where the rhythm of life slowed to the hum of bees and the whisper of wind through olive trees. I stayed at a small vineyard near Montepulciano, run by a family who had tended the land for generations. The patriarch, Signor Bianchi, taught me how to prune vines, while the scent of damp earth rose around us. His daughter, Elena, invited me into their kitchen and showed me how to make pici al ragù. As the sauce simmered, she spoke of her grandmother, who used to sing while kneading pasta. The warmth of the kitchen wrapped around me like a memory I didn't know I had. That evening, as we sat on the terrace, sipping their ruby-red wine, the hills turned gold and the air filled with the soft buzz of crickets. I realized then that Tuscany doesn't speak loudly, it murmurs. You just have to listen. Day 4. The Amalfi Coast, where the sea dreams. If Tuscany was a lullaby, the Amalfi Coast was a song sung in sunlight. I drove down the serpentine roads that clung to cliffs, each turn revealing a new miracle. Whitewashed houses stacked like seashells, lemon groves spilling down to turquoise waters. In Positano, the scent of citrus mingled with salt, and the sea shimmered with the kind of blue that seems too perfect to exist. I spent the afternoon on a small boat with a fisherman named Luca, who told me stories of shipwrecks and sea spirits as we glided past hidden coves. He let me steer for a while, laughing as I struggled against the waves. That night, the village celebrated a local festival. Music, laughter, and lanterns floating up into the sky. I danced barefoot on the beach, the Mediterranean lapping at my ankles, strangers linking hands like old friends. And when the fireworks exploded above the water, painting the cliffs in color, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, unguarded joy. Day 5, Venice. Reflections in water and time. Venice greeted me like a dream half dissolved in mist. The air smelled of salt and age, of damp stone and adventure. I stepped into a gondola as morning light spilled over the Grand Canal, gilding the water like liquid glass. The gondolier, Marco, hummed softly as we drifted beneath bridges older than memory. Venice, he said, is like a woman, beautiful, unpredictable, and always about to disappear. In St. Mark's Square, pigeons whirled above tourists while church bells tolled like echoes from another century. I wandered into a narrow alley where I found an old bookstore half submerged by the tide. The owner, an ancient man with watery blue eyes, pressed a worn Italian poetry book into my hands. "For your journey," he said, "because words travel further than feet." That evening, I watched the sunset from the Rialto Bridge. The canals caught the dying light, and for a moment, Venice seemed suspended between water and sky, past and present. I realized that travel isn't about movement, it's about transformation. Day 6, Abruzzo. The Forgotten Mountains. My final days led me inland, away from the glittering coasts and crowded piazzas, to Abruzzo, a region cradled by mountains and silence. The road wound through forests of beech and chestnut, until I reached a small village called Santo Stefano di Cesagno, perched on a ridge like a whisper of stone. There I met an old shepherd named Pietro, who spoke little English, but had eyes that told entire stories. He took me up the slopes at dawn, where the mist curled through the valleys and bells chimed faintly from distant churches. He offered me bread and cheese from his satchel, and we ate in silence as the sun rose, turning the mountains from gray to gold. In the evening, I joined the villagers in the square for their annual harvest celebration. They danced, sang folk songs, and poured homemade wine into chipped glasses. A woman grabbed my hand, pulling me into the circle, and I laughed until my ribs hurt. There, beneath a sky thick with stars, I understood. Joy needs no translation. Day 7, farewell at dawn. My last morning in Italy came quietly. I stood on the platform at a small station, the train waiting to carry me back north. My suitcase was heavier now, not with souvenirs, but with moments. The smell of lemon trees, the warmth of Tuscan kitchens, the sound of distant bells, the shimmer of Venetian light. As the train began to move, the landscape blurred into a watercolor of green and gold. I thought of all the people I'd met, each one a thread in Italy's vast tapestry. The country had given me more than beauty. It had given me presence. when the mountains faded behind me, I realized that travel doesn't end at departure. It lives on in how we see the world afterward. Italy had taught me to slow down, to taste, to listen, to find wonder in the everyday. And as I leaned back in my seat, watching the sunrise over the fields, I smiled at a thought that had become a promise. Every journey begins again the moment it ends.